the most shocking thing was to listen to those noises that represent the routine of a house. And you hear the sound of glasses with wine, and you hear the cigarette. You hear all these noises. You hear the family in the background, the children playing in the other room. And then there was this scene in which there is a fly who interferes their conversation. So Hassan, the journalist, is saying to Eichmann, let's get rid of this annoying fly. It's like a Jewish fly, so let's kill him.
The critical component to mind control. Being made over to be clones of the person who's at the top of the pyramid. Interested in the subject because of my own cult involvement. I was recruited in 1974 into a front group of the Moonies.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of my podcast, Cult Conversations, the Influence Continuum with Dr. Steve Hassan. And my next guest I've been waiting to interview for literally 3 years. I am so grateful to have Yariv Mozer from Israel on with me today. And we're recording this June 16th, and right now there's a active missile situation happening to Iran and to Israel, and unfortunately, it's a tragic situation, but that's what's happening as we speak. So I'm very grateful you're willing to do this recording. Yariv, I just want to give my listeners more about your background and talents and expertise. So you're a teacher at Tel Aviv University, at the Tisch School of Film and Television. You're a board member of the Israeli Academy of Film and Television, an Emmy Award nominee, Television Academy Honors Award winner for your Paramount feature documentary, We Will Dance Again. That's a new one, 2024, which you can tell us about in a minute. You also did a documentary on Ben Gurion, Epilogue, in 2017. But what I really want you to talk about today is your 2022 film, which is now on Amazon Prime, people. It's called The Devil's Confession, The Lost Eichmann Tapes. And I, as my listeners know, I've been studying brainwashing and mind control for 49 years since I got deprogrammed from the Moonies cult. And so I've long considered Adolf Hitler a malignant narcissist. That's what Erich Fromm designated him. And that's literally the stereotypical profile of all cult leaders, malignant narcissists. And in chapter 3 of The Cult of Trump, I'm going to just move this a little bit. The Cult of Trump, I have in chapter 3, I compare Trump with Jim Jones of the People's Temple and Hubbard of Scientology and Moon of my cult and point out the parallels. So I've long believed it was a brainwashing, mind control, authoritarian cult. But I've also been told over the decades that stories that I've come to learn that are not true, like the authoritarian personality, which was Adorno's book, that people, the Germans are just authoritarians, but in my studies of Milgram, he showed Americans would also kill people because they were ordered to do so in his shock experiment. So I've long been talking about social psychology. I'm almost finished, Yariv. We'll get to you in 1 second. Just a little framework for my listeners because they'll really appreciate this. And the other myth that I didn't make sense to me, and your groundbreaking movie exposed, was Hannah Arendt's banality of evil theory that Eichmann, told a story during the Nuremberg trials. Hey, I was just following orders. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm not, a bad person. I was a cog in the machine. And I keep hearing the banality of evil and very famous people quoting her. But I saw your documentary, and that's what I want you to talk about first and foremost, if you don't mind.
Just to be precise, and I'm sorry that I disturbed, but it was the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. Eichmann was not caught for the Nuremberg trials. So he was caught almost only in 1960, 15 years after the Nuremberg trials, and was kidnapped and brought to Israel. And he was tried before Israeli jury and in front of the Israeli public. And you could say, in a way, in front of the Jewish people. So the Jewish people placed the Nazi architect of the final solution on trial. And this is where he immediately said, all during the trial, I was a cog, as you have described, a cog who fulfilled the orders I've received from above. I had nothing to do with it. I never understood what I'm doing in practice.
Thank you for the correction. And I am a human, and being someone who's a scholar, I try to always cite my sources and only want trustworthy information out there. And am I correct in remembering that it was the Israelis that found him in Argentina and brought him to, or he was
the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad kidnapped him. There is a very big story how it came to happen, but it was the Israeli Mossad who kidnapped Eichmann eventually and brought him to Israel secretly behind the doors of Argentina. Well, there are some assumptions that maybe the Argentinians knew all about it, but till this day we are the story we all know is that Israel did it in its own means, undercover. With special agents going into Argentina and doing it.
So you're a famous documentarian. How did you come to get the idea, I should document this? Tell us.
Well, I'm always looking at my documentaries as seeking to deal with something connected to my identity. And my identity is multi-layered. So I think that every documentary is connected somehow to the story of my family or the story of myself or my identity. And of course, I'm Jewish and Israeli. And I, in a way, first thing, I'm a third generation to Holocaust survivors. And from the side of my mother, she was raised from two Holocaust survivors. Both of my grandparents succeeded in running away during the war. They were not, fortunately, in camps or anything, but they did succeed in running. My grandfather was one of the Sugihara survivors. Sugihara, the Japanese attaché in Lita, who gave visas to several thousands of Jews, and my grandfather was one of them. So it's a famous story. And my grandfather and grandmother met during this voyage outside of Europe, fell in love and came to Israel. And they were here before the state was established. So this notion of being a third generation was always there. And at the same time, when I came to study at Tel Aviv University, and this was between early 2000 till 2004, when I studied for my first degree in the film school. The woman you mentioned, Hannah Arendt, the philosopher, she was the big, philosopher that we were all trained to admire.
Right.
And back then, there was a very famous documentary that was released called The Specialist, by Eyal Sivan is the film director. And it was based entirely of her theory, of her book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. So I was raised by this film to understand that the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem was in a way a show to take this little cog, this person who was a specialist in the Jewish question, in the Jewish matter, and turn him into the one to blame for the whole Holocaust, although he only obeyed orders. He was a technocrat. He was a minor person in this whole...
that was the claim.
Yeah, that was the claim, and that was the claim in this film. This
Right.
film really pushed Hannah Arendt's claim forward. And so that was the thing, the story I knew. And before I did the film, I heard the story. For me, it was more than a rumor. I didn't know anything about it. That there are some tapes of Eichmann in his place of hiding, because I knew Eichmann succeeded in running away from Europe to Argentina, found a place of hiding, changed his name. And during that time, he met a journalist who convinced him to give him an interview. And even more than that, the interview was recorded on tapes. And in them, Eichmann admits, and even more than that, takes credit and brags about his role as the person who did everything to achieve the plan of the final solution to the Jewish question. So this is Eichmann, who is completely sounds different than the one who was placed in trial in Jerusalem. And this captivated me. I was first of all, how would I say it? Amazed that no one in Israel knew about those tapes. They were not in Yad Vashem, the place where we have the museum for
the
the
Holocaust
Holocaust.
Memorial Museum, which I visited several times. I'll just break in and say I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, and my father-in-law escaped Poland through the sewers and came to Palestine, was put in a British concentration camp, and he's 97 and lives in Tel Aviv as we speak, by the way.
Wow. Oh my God.
And he's
not
brilliant,
so many like him.
Still sharp. You know, he became a physicist. He went to MIT, and my mother-in-law got a PhD from Harvard, but they met and fell in love and raised the family over here. Anyway, this is your story about this, this architect of evil that, and when I watched your movie, I remember the Fly story, if you could share that little ditty.
Yeah, this is the first opening scene in which, when I, just to complete the story and say just a few more words,
of course.
I didn't believe that the tapes exist. So I started a research in which eventually I've located those tapes in an archive in Germany. And the problem was to get access to the tapes and to be able to get them, all those tapes in a TV series, in a movie. It's also on Amazon, it's a TV series of 3 episodes to be precise. And there is also a movie version. So I'm not sure what you saw. In festivals, it was a movie version. So
I only saw what you shared when it first came out. You gave me an advanced preview with a password. I think it was on Vimeo. And I've been waiting for 3 years.
Version. That was the movie version. On Amazon, you have the 3 episodes, the complete 3 episodes.
So when we publish this, we make a blog summarizing, and we'll add all the links for those on my Substack, and you should watch this. Please continue.
Yes,
this is
amazing.
Fascinating.
And so I started negotiating with the owner of the tapes, who still doesn't want to disclose his details. He keeps himself confidential. It's not a person, it's a company in Switzerland. I don't know the name of the company. I've made the whole negotiation with the archive in Germany, eventually granting me the opportunity to get full access to the entire tapes that were there. And it was the COVID period of time, so I couldn't just get to Germany. It took me some time to get the permissions. But when I came to Germany and listened to those tapes, and I don't understand German, but the thing that was the most shocking thing was to listen to those, and I'm getting back to the Fly story, to those noises that represent the routine of a house. Eichmann came to a living room with this journalist who invited other former Nazis to join them
Yes.
and hear the stories. And you hear the sound of glasses with wine, and you hear the cigarette being, lighting the
Exhaled.
cigarette.
Yeah.
And you hear all these noises. You hear the family in the background, the children playing in the other room, the woman, the wife of the journalist. And then there was this scene in which there is a fly who interferes their conversation. So Hassan is saying to Eichmann, Hassan, the journalist, is saying to Eichmann, let's get rid of this annoying fly. It's like a Jewish fly. He doesn't give us, so let's kill him. And Eichmann is killing the fly. And this is a small moment which will never be in transcripts of these tapes.
Yeah.
It's a small moment that represent how much anti-Semite those people are and were.
Yeah.
Because there are still, I believe, anti-Semite people and neo-Nazis among us, unfortunately.
And in the United States, I will add.
Yes, in many countries. So this is the scene that opens the film. And at the same time, I got to locate and track the daughter of the journalist, Hassan, Professor Saskia Hassan, a very big name in the studies of sociology.
Mm.
And she's a big expert, if I'm not mistaken, in globalization.
Mm.
And only 10 years ago, she admitted that she's the daughter of the famous William Zassin who interviewed Eichmann. And I contacted her and interviewed her, and she was very sincere in saying, I remember as a child, 10 years old, this Eichmann coming to our house. She remembers those meetings happening every weekend, because just imagine a kid living with a father who tells her for a period of half a year or even more than that, this weekend, I'm dedicating the time to an interview, and you need to go out and play in your room, and you cannot spend the time with me. So she does remember it. This person, she describes him, his face and his, the whole experience of this person coming to her house, and the whole atmosphere changed. So this was a very important interview to add to the series as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Amazing. So, so to cut to the chase, and I started explaining a little bit more because we haven't talked before directly. We just emailed with each other. I was explaining that for me, I've always thought of Hitler as a cult leader, malignant narcissist that Erich Fromm, the survivor, a child of Holocaust survivors, named as to describe Hitler. I've always thought of all cult leaders; they all have that. Not only not having empathy and grandiosity and need for praise and all of the standard narcissistic traits, but thinking they're above the law, pathological lying, sadistic, paranoid, threatening, revengeful, all of the criteria really fits Hitler. And I should also say, when I first was a whistleblower against the Moonies, I was on a TV show in Boston with someone who had been a Hitler Youth, who was listening to my description of the Moonies, and he's like, that's exactly what happened to me. And, they separated the kids from the parents, and they took us to camps, and they indoctrinated us. And so I've always thought of the Nazis as a mind control cult. And I'll just add, Yariv, I just finished a book by Ann Nelson called Red Orchestra, which took her 9 years to write, but it was something I had never heard of before. But there was apparently 3 million Germans who resisted Hitler in Germany. And the Gestapo named it Red Orchestra because they thought it was all a Soviet Union conspiracy, but it wasn't. There was very few and very little influence of Russia, even though they were actively at war with Germany. But people were putting out leaflets, and 300,000 got caught and killed. Women by guillotine, men by hanging. But they resisted the fascists because that wasn't the Germany they grew up with. And so I'm just adding that that my understanding is nobody's born an anti-Semite, a hateful, cult person. They're raised that way. They're given beliefs and values, and with corporal punishment, young minds get shaped along those lines. And my work as a human rights activist is just to hey, people, we're on the same planet. Do we want to survive together? Are we going to find a way to have peace and have differences, but understand and compromise, or not? And I just think your work is so important, because I want to just dispel once and for all this notion of the banality of evil, and people are off the hook because they're following orders. That's not what the law says. And even in the American military, we just had a pseudo parade for Trump's birthday as 5 to 11 million Americans demonstrated in the streets. But the military is not supposed to be partisan. They're not supposed to follow one leader. They're supposed to follow the Constitution, right? And the thing is you're not supposed to follow an order to fire on peaceful citizens. The military is supposed to be against enemies of America. So what I'm trying to say is we all have conscience. We all need to follow what's true and real. And it doesn't cut it to say I was just following orders, ever.
And this is what Eichmann was trying to say in the trial in Jerusalem. This was his line of defense. Him and his lawyer, and he stuck to it during the investigation in the police for a period of 9 months before the trial began. And during the trial, of course. Now, the changing, I would say, the thing that he didn't expect that would happen, and it was a changing point also in my research to find those tapes. And that's a crucial moment in the series. And I will a little bit ruin
Tell us, seriously.
The experience of people watching it, but not everything. It's a small thing. It's a changing point in the narrative. Mm-hmm. It's when Hassan, the journalist, after Eichmann was kidnapped by the Mossad and brought to Israel, he woke up in Argentina and understood that he had something in his hands. And this was this high-rank officer admitting the crimes of the Holocaust. So it didn't take him a lot of time to understand what he has and to look for the money. And he sold it for the American magazine Life, which was back then, I assume you know better, was a big thing.
It was magazine. Huge when I was growing up. It was a very big, glossy color magazine.
Yeah. And let's see if I have it here, because some of your people are still viewing us, right? They're not only,
absolutely. There's an audio podcast, and it's also be video on my YouTube channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan.
That is the original Life magazine, published in December 1960. So it's 4 months before the trial began in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. 5 months after he was captivated by the Israeli Mossad. And Hassan receives money from the Life magazine, and anonymously, he doesn't put his name. He, by the way, if you know the very famous documentary filmmaker Alex Gibney.
Oh, I love Alex's work. He's done a lot on Scientology. He did the BB Files too, which I watched.
Exactly. Alex's father Robert Gibney was the one in Life magazine. He knew German. Therefore, he was the one preparing the article and writing it. Robert
Small
Gibney.
world.
So,
Wow. I
yes.
love this little factoid.
Yeah. And this is, I transported them to the butcher by Adolf Eichmann. So in his own words,
Wow.
you have this article being published in Life magazine. And in the opening of the article, I'll show this as well, Eichmann tells his own damning story. It is being written, let me find it and I'll quote it exactly. Well, I can't find it now, but it's that this article is being based on hours of tapes being recorded in Argentina in 1957, and Life magazine received access to those tapes. So by this point, 4 months before the trial began, everyone in the world knows that Eichmann is on tape admitting his crimes. Now, you can imagine how the Israeli attorney general was appointed as the prosecutor in the trial, and the Israeli police who investigates Eichmann and brings it to his cell, shows it to him. And just imagine how Eichmann reacts to this newspaper. And everyone are searching for the tapes. At this point of time, I know because I found documents, by the way, top secret documents, till very few years ago, kept in the Israeli State Archive, that show that everyone were in panic and even knew in advance because the CIA knew from Life magazine. One of the editors told them in advance, This article is going to be published. So everyone are like, what is going to be published in this article? Except Eichmann, who very early, in a very smart way, because we had some Nazi figures who said, I'm not a person. You know, the Manyuk was caught in early 90s, if I'm not mistaken, in Israel, placed to trial. But he said, I'm not the Manyuk. You caught the wrong person. Eichmann from the very beginning admits, I am Eichmann. You caught the right person. But I was just following orders. And he does say from the very beginning, I did give an interview to Willem Zassen, this Dutch journalist who was my friend in Argentina. But a journalist has the freedom to elaborate and, change my words. And it's what journalists do. So if there are tapes, bring the tapes. Prove in court that this article is true, because I deny the words that are being said here. These are not my words. And during the entire trial, there was always, because that fascinated me, that how many historians, except one, Dr. Bettina Stangnet in Germany, but all the rest of the historians ignored the fact that during the trial, so many meetings were in the prosecutor tried to tell Eichmann, but these are your words. And he said, no, these are not my words. Bring the tapes. And the tapes were never placed in this trial. And this question was mind-blowing for me. I mean, if the Israeli Mossad succeeded in bringing Eichmann from Argentina, how come they cannot bring those tapes?
Right.
They know exactly where it all happened.
Right.
And this question is, I would say, another layer of narrative during this series, in which I present two, you would say, my assumptions of why did it happen. And in both cases, I think the state of Israel didn't want those tapes to be presented in the trial.
Wow. So what was the agenda?
And I will say just briefly, because I think people should watch and get the whole
I'm gonna
story.
watch it immediately after we finish this recording, because and I don't remember the Life magazine in the version that I watched 3 years ago.
It was.
It was? Okay.
But yes.
I forgot. It's 3 years. So that's my memory.
Yeah, that's okay.
I was 6, by the way, in 1960. So it was before.
Oh, in 1960, I thought that you were talking about 3 years ago.
No,
Sorry.
when Life magazine came out and told that story, I was 6. I was 9 when JFK was assassinated. It was.
So first of all, you don't look like a person who lived in those years. So
thank you.
I didn't expect that you would say that.
I'm just saying the CIA has their own dark agenda that Americans are learning about. The CIA was involved with the Korean CIA and the Moonies, the cult that I got recruited in. So, each country has its own intelligence services, and the operations department have their own agenda that is not necessarily for the public good.
Definitely, and I believe in this. And the state of Israel was a young country. We are talking about 1960, 61, 12, 13 years after it was established in 1948.
Right.
David Ben-Gurion is the prime minister. He did the unimaginable, raising from the ashes the Jewish people after this catastrophe of the Holocaust, in which we lost 6 million people, bringing those millions from diaspora, from different countries from all over the world that gathered in the state of Israel, a very weak, especially financially. They didn't have the money. And David Ben-Gurion very early understood that he needs to bring the money from Western Germany. So by forcing the Germans to pay compensation, but not only for the Holocaust survivors, but also to the state of Israel, this money would help the economy of this early state, of this young state.
Right.
And this is what he did. Behind the scenes, because this was very controversial, people were going out to the streets demonstrating against it because they couldn't believe. Just in 1952, he started negotiating with Germany. This was 7 years after the Holocaust. Just imagine. And during the time of the trial, during the time that this Life magazine is being published, there is a very, it's the peak of relationship between Western Germany and Israel. And Israel had the interest to keep this diplomatic relationship, which was a lot going underground, to keep it stable. What we are saying that at this point in time, Israel received the money for the nuclear power plant, which is kept secret till this day. The money came from West Germany. So
I didn't know
there was this interest to keep everything smooth and not to make them upset. And you can imagine that many ex-Nazis were still in the leadership of West Germany, and they were afraid of what Eichmann is going to say on those tips. They were afraid that this article in Life is only a sample of what is being kept on those hours and hours of tapes. And so what we find in the archives and in many documents is the fact that Israel doesn't have the interest to bring those tapes to the trial. They had enough evidence, even without the tapes, to
prosecute,
to find Eichmann guilty. Yes.
Yeah, to prosecute him successfully.
Yes.
The more I learn about politics, the more I abhor politics. Because I don't know, but I grew up more idealistic. I guess I'm part of the people who were told Americans are so noble and special and exceptional and all of that. And I interviewed, just on a short tangent, Yariv, I interviewed Craig Unger about his book Den of Spies. And in this book, he talks about how William Casey became Ronald Reagan's campaign manager and made a dirty deal with the Iranian terrorists to hold the hostages so Jimmy Carter wouldn't get reelected. And
Wow.
the Israelis were involved in that negotiation with frickin' Iran, who the Israeli nation has said is our mortal enemy, but they were doing a deal to put a Republican in power in the United States because they thought it would serve their interests, obviously, to subvert, the campaign laws. I mean, it was a traitorous act to conspire with Iranian terrorists who were holding Americans hostage. But that he was able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that's what happened, that installed Ronald Reagan, that began this slide into where we are today with the GOP now aligning fully with just very, very cynical, dark forces that want, power and money, etc. It's amazing.
Yes, history fascinates me a lot because of these stories, that every generation can go back and discover more and more layers of what is being hidden in archives, in things that we need time to get access to and discover. And I think that this is what we try to do in The Devil's Confession, the Lost Eichmann tapes, is to come and say, you think you know everything about the Eichmann trial. You think you heard all the stories you could hear about Adolf Eichmann and his connection to the Holocaust. But here comes a new angle into the trial, into Eichmann's words, into all you have known about him. Come and see it all from a different perspective. And I think this is what makes this series unique.
Yeah, very special. And I'll just add, if we go back to the 1949 book by Eric Blair, who wrote under the name George Orwell, and his novel 1984, his protagonist his job was going through all of the records and deleting the names of those party members who are now deemed to be not loyal enough. And that's what we're now looking at in the United States. And we have to learn from history. If we're going to survive, we need to have wisdom and not repeat the same mistakes of the past. And unfortunately, authoritarians want people to be ignorant. And if they are educated, they want to confuse them and overwhelm them and create doubt and distrust in experts and in science and in history in order to more easily control the populations.
I agree. Yes. And we are living in times in which we have a lot to learn. Hopefully it will happen in the future, just to understand what's going on behind the scenes, even in our political situation now. I mean, as you said in the beginning, war is happening outside. Yes. And as we speak, I could get an alert on my phone instructing me to stay at home and be in a position to run to the shelter in just 10 minutes. Yeah. And then sirens and everything. So, I
have family and friends in Israel right now. And and what the public is not understanding, because the media is largely manipulated, and certainly on digital media, things are manipulated with algorithms these days. But half the Israelis don't like Netanyahu and the messianic religious cultists that are keeping him in power. And I did watch the Bibi Files, which showed Netanyahu's corruption. And I'll just add, in the Cult of Trump, I put a section on the Jewish right and Netanyahu, who talked about Trump being another King Cyrus, a sinner, but God was using King Cyrus. That's what the pseudo-Christian far right use, that Trump's a sinner, but he's our man because God's going to use him. And it's like, hello, this is a story. And can you really believe a pathological liar and alleged rapist and a 34-point felon cares about you? And as people are being fired, they're going to lose Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. More people are waking up that Trump is a cult leader and a demagogue, a wannabe demagogue.
And yes, I agree. It's the same process happening here with this specific government. And, well, we're now in war, so everything is very sensitive here. And
yes.
I don't want to get too much into politics.
Totally. I hear you loud and clear. I'll just add, I listened to Ehud Olmert interviewed on the Ezra Klein podcast before the war with Iran got into active mode. And he was just speaking very openly about Netanyahu's corruption and how he's allied with these extremist messianic cultists. And there are Jewish cults, there are Christian cults, there are, Islamic radical cults.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
But it doesn't mean all Jews are cultists or all Christians or all Muslims are cultists. And we need to understand there's a continuum, and you have to look at behaviors, not what the words are, but the behaviors. Exactly. And right now we're just seeing so much Hamas Palestinian propaganda where the progressives are saying we have to free Palestine, which means eradicate Israel. And I'm like, what? You don't understand what you're saying?
Exactly.
And you don't understand the history of the Jews and the Holocaust. People knew that this was happening and no country was accepting Jews. This was a conspiracy. And I'll just add, I interviewed Charles Gallagher, a Boston College historian, on the Nazis in Copley Square about how James Coughlin, the Catholic priest who had a big radio show, was an anti-Semite, and he was part of the paid German propaganda. And they actually tried to do a physical coup in the United States in 1940 to keep America out of the war against Hitler, with guns, with rifles, and breaking into armories and getting rifles and stuff. And a big meeting at Madison Square Garden of Nazis, with the Sieg Heils and everything else in America. And we need to understand history. We really,
Definitely.
really do.
And you mentioned my latest film, We Will Dance Again, which is on Paramount Plus, in which I show minute by minute what happened on the 7th of October when Hamas massacred those children in a dance festival, music festival on the border with Gaza. And you see, because that was something that I was determined to place in the film, the real images that Hamas captured in its own GoPro cameras. Every terrorist has its own GoPro camera. And I would say that there is, in a way, a transition between the Nazis that understood that they're doing something evil, that they're doing something that they need to use to hide it by using fake words. So they're not using extermination, they're using special treatment. Eichmann, there is a great scene in the series in which he explains that he had to sign on each transportation to Auschwitz I'm sending those Jews for special treatment. And Zassin is asking him, do you mean special treatment as for killing them? And Eichmann says, well, that was the routine. Special treatment is what I had to write in those documents. And the same thing is the final solution for the Jewish question. So they're not saying eliminating the Jews. They're using the final solution. And in this point in time, Hamas, which is a terror group, used GoPro cameras and activated them to capture those horrific moments in which they kill and terrorize and brutally capture people and kill them and raped and kidnapped and everything. And they captured those moments and placed them on social media until they understood that it harms their own image. And this is when they took off all these images. But in the beginning, in the 7th of October, they transmitted those images live to the world on Facebook. A family is they just killed their daughter and they show it on Facebook and people could see it. And that is, I think, the insane period of time that we live in. And still people do not want to believe that Hamas are not fighting for the rights of the Palestinian people. They are fighting a jihad war against Western values, against Western people. They did not differentiate between Arabs, Muslims, Jews, Christians when they entered Israel and started slaughtering people.
Yeah, and they want to kill Americans. That's part of the agenda too. It wasn't just to kill Israeli Jews. So, when January 6th happened here and Trump tried to do a violent coup, there was all of this footage that were being done with cell phones that convicted everybody because that got shared on social media and there were dedicated activists who collected it and before it got deleted or, they took the phones and they were able to get access to and that's what convicted them. Who knew that Trump would ever give them unconditional pardons and say it wasn't violent and it was a party and it was just a peaceful visit, or it was an inside job by the Democrats to try to blame them, or it was Antifa, the made-up, group, etc. So I need to ask you, because I want to watch We Will Dance Again. I'm wondering if we should spend a few more minutes promoting that now. I think we should anyway, but maybe we'll do a second interview with your permission on that film, because I would like more people to understand what happened. But at the end of the BB files, which I had not understood or ever heard of, there was a point at the end where it was talking about Netanyahu wanting to help fund Hamas through Qatar. And when the attack happened, I've been to Israel many times. I actually worked as a student for Tel Aviv University at Tel Beersheva in 1971 when it was all desert. There were Bedouin Arabs with camels and we saw jets and helicopters going over. We were in tents. Anyway, it was incomprehensible to me that the Israeli intelligence apparatus wouldn't know that there was going to be an attack. And I've been saying, from my experience, and I know friends and colleagues who were formerly in Israeli intelligence, it boggled my mind for the cult of Trump that the Israeli intelligence didn't know that the Russians were hacking Facebook and helping Trump get elected, and so that opened that door for me. But it boggles my mind that somebody in the highest levels didn't know there was going to be an attack and just said, let it happen because we need to We need to do this eradication thing because of numbers. I don't know. And if you don't want to talk about it.
No, I can talk about it because I know what I believe happened. I think we were arrogant and we had this concept in mind in which Hamas doesn't have an interest to invade to Israel and use all its plans to invade to Israel. We just didn't believe it will happen. And we didn't believe that we are strong enough and we are strong enough. But sometimes all the information is under your nose and you just don't want to believe that this will happen. By the way, it happened 4 days ago to the Iranians as well. The Iranians had all the clues in the world to understand that Israel will start an attack. They couldn't believe it. There's a big difference between understanding something, seeing it, and believing it. And that is, I think, the main thing that happened to Israel. Bibi Netanyahu had an interest that Hamas will be strong in Gaza because by this, he will make the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank weaker. He didn't want to make peace with the Palestinian Authority. He didn't want to reconcile. He didn't want to have negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. This is against the ideology of the right wing in Israel. And therefore, for them, and they even say that out loud, this is good to have Hamas as a strong entity. Because by this, you can show the world, well, look, Hamas, this is what will come from the Palestinians and not the Palestinian Authority. You could have, and they could have, made the Palestinian Authority stronger by eliminating Hamas. But they didn't have the interest. And this is the thing that the Bibi files show. And I think it deserves a different discussion and a different, it opens a whole different story. But I myself still believe that one day we will be able to find those people in the Palestinian nation that still believes in the fact that the Jews will have a state here in the land of Israel, in the land of Palestine. And at the same time, Palestinians should have the right to live here among us. And we could, two nations, live together. But you need to find those people that have not the jihadist Hamas.
Of course, Iranian influence.
Exactly, Iranian influence and Shia and all these things. You need to find those moderate people that are in favor of dialogue. And I'm sure that in both our nations, there are people that are open for dialogue. And by this, I'm still optimistic.
And I was surprised, but happy because it's my belief. But I was surprised Ehud Olmert, in his interview just a few weeks ago, said he still believes in a two-state solution, which I don't know if it's feasible anymore with all the horrors that have happened.
Of course, because with all the horrors that happened, it's very difficult to find those people now in Israel. And unfortunately also in the Palestinian people that could still believe, that could still have the trust in this kind of a solution. But this could be the only solution for these two nations.
And I want to also just comment psychohistorically that my recollection is Israel was negotiating a relationship with Saudi Arabia, and that's what pushed Iran, because the Sunnis don't like the Shiites. Most Americans don't understand there are two factions of Muslims that distrust each other. Why? Because their historical claims are different people had different relationships with Muhammad. But that's what triggered it, was because Iran wanted Hamas to sabotage any furthering and deepening of relationships with Saudi Arabia. But I'm reading today in the news that Saudi Arabia and Qatar is helping the United States to help Israel shoot down Iranian missiles, if that reporting is correct, which again, I want people to understand reality isn't black and white and simple
Exactly.
and us
Exactly.
versus them. There are many, many details, and we often don't have that robust, full picture of all the different interests and personalities and backstory relationships and all of that. But it's not so simple, and that we really need to think about a future we all want to be part of, which is planetary survival. Which, of course, the fossil fuel corporations and countries, they want to just keep making money and having power, but they're destroying our habitat, which is destroying their children and their grandchildren and their legacy out of short-sightedness.
Yes.
It's like, grow up, understand. If we're in a boat in the middle of the ocean, you don't drill holes in the bottom of the boat and say, well, it's going to help me out in the short term.
I agree.
It just doesn't, it's not smart. So I'm glad to just have you talk about We Will Dance again, because honestly, from your incredible bio, I didn't know it was about the Hamas attack on the dance festival, the rave festival that was going on. So I want to interview you again if you're willing to promote that. And if you know the filmmaker of the BB Files, please let them know I'm interested also, because my audience
the BB
cares
Files
about.
was produced by Alex Gibney. So this is your address.
But there was an Israeli, I thought, that was. He was Alex was the executive producer.
Yes,
but
Alex was an executive producer. I think
I have
there
not
was
successfully reached Alex Gibney. I've been trying to reach him for years because, like, literally, he's been doing such great documentaries about mind control and Scientology.
I will try to help you. I know the journalist,
okay.
so I'll give you his details. Yes.
Great. I just want to share knowledge from ethical, responsible journalists and documentarians who want people to understand, the deeper story, that it's not a superficial thing. I just want to say again, it's called The Devil's Confession, The Lost Eichmann Tapes. So there's a movie and there's a 3-part series on Amazon Prime. And you are a board member of the Israeli Academy of Film and Television and a Tel Aviv University Tisch Film School teacher. And
I will just mention, if I may, that
please.
The Devil's Confession, The Lost Eichmann Tapes is a production of MGM Television together with the Israeli public channel Kan 11 and produced by Sipur Studios in Israel. So just to give all the credits.
Great, absolutely. And I'll also just throw in that the Israeli government, the Director General of Social Services for Israel, has consulted with me about the cult problem in Israel. And they were very interested in Western cults. And when I brought up the ultra-Orthodox, they're like, we can't go there. Like,
true.
There's a fence. So we're not interested in knowing that, except my model, you can apply, just look at the behavior control variables and information and thought and emotional control variables. And I do hear from ex-members of Chabad and other groups, but they are too afraid to be public. So, and that, as a scholar, I want sources that are not just anonymous. I want people who are willing to be public. Last words?
Thank you very much. And in every stage I am praying for one thing, that the hostages, the living hostages that are still kept in the tunnels of Gaza, will be released from the hands of Hamas. And if that means the end of the war, then the end of the war should happen for the sake of those living people, 20 living hostages that are still trying to survive in conditions that remind us of the Holocaust. So, as I said, as a third generation of Holocaust survivors, it is our duty as the entire Jewish people to call for the immediate freedom and release of those 20 living hostages that are from our people. And
thank you for adding that. It's very important. And I'll just add, if people want the war against the Palestinian people in Gaza to stop, Hamas could stop it in a minute. If they cared a tiny bit about the children and the women and the civilians who are dying, that they were using these people as shields, hiding their guns and their fortresses, etc. So it's not so simple. Like, we really need to understand the political forces that are happening. So thank you again for consenting to do this interview.
Thank you, Stephen.
And
it was a pleasure, really, and an honor.
Really, it's an honor for me too. And stay safe, and please stay in touch. And I'm gonna not only watch the Amazon Prime, the Lost Eichmann tapes, Devil's Confession, but I'm also going to watch We Will Dance Again, which just came out in Paramount feature documentary 2024, and continued success. Is it fair to ask you what your next project is, or is it secret?
Still searching.
Oh, well, let me put it out there. I would love a documentary, and you can talk to Alex Gibney about it, on brainwashing and mind control, and explaining how minds can be bent and how people can be de-radicalized, and the connection with Facebook and X and social media and algorithms, because I think that's the cutting edge. That's going to make the difference between authoritarianism or people, coming back to democratic values and human rights.
I'll definitely consider this.
Good. Thank you so much.
Story. Thank you.
להתראות.
להתראות, תודה.
תודה רבה.